This episode of the Lawn Care Business Success podcast is brought to you by Shock Strap. Shock straps are the unique shock-absorbing tie-down that feature a built-in urethane shock absorber made to keep tension on the strap and your load secure. With over 100,000 satisfied clients and 14 years of secure loads, Shock straps are built to last. Go check them out at shockstrap.com. You're listening to the Lawn Care Business Success Podcast, the weekly show sharing proven methods and systems in marketing, equipment, and customer service, educational and motivational, to help make your lawn care business an overwhelming success. Now here's your host, Julio Tomei. Welcome, Lawn Care Nation, to another episode of the Lawn Care Business Success Podcast. I'm your host, Julio Tomei, and this is episode number 142, entitled Power Waking Your Way to Profit. Well, hello, everybody, and thanks again for joining me this week on another episode of the Lawn Care Business Success Podcast. I really appreciate you guys tuning in each and every week and downloading those episodes, as well as for the questions, the comments, and the feedback that you guys have been sending through. Well, it is finally springtime here where I'm based, and hopefully you guys are all starting to mow. I know a couple of you guys, I've been posting some pictures of my first week of mowing. And a couple of you guys have commented that, the snow is still, pretty heavy where you are. One person even commented that the snow was halfway up the doors on their house in height. They were just waiting for, the melt to come so that they could hopefully start to mow again. I really feel for you guys. I am not a winter person at all. I totally, love the spring and summertime. Those are my favorite seasons. And so I am completely enjoying the weather here and being able to start that first week of mowing. It's always a chaotic week because the phone just starts ringing off the hook. It's amazing how it goes from completely silent through the winter time to the first nice warm week with the sun coming out and the phone just goes nuts. And I'm already just starting out for this week, and I'm already having trouble keeping up with the calls and returning calls and being able to do the work at the same time of the jobs that I already have from existing customers. But it's a good problem to have, of course. So I'm not complaining in that sense. Just always interesting to me how it goes gangbusters. It's like turning on a tap from completely dry to full flow all at once. Being spring, I just want to remind you guys as well, if you're looking at outfitting your trailers and you are thinking about those Equipment Defender racks, that you can check them out at lawncarebusinesssuccess.com/Equipment Defender. And don't forget that I've got that coupon code that you can use to save yourself 10% off your order. So when you get to the checkout, doesn't matter what you're buying there on their website, there's a section there for the discount code at the checkout. And my discount code is LCBS10. That's, of course, stands for Lawn Care Business Success, and 10 for 10% off. So LCBS10 is the coupon code to get 10% off your order of Equipment Defender. So I've had kind of an interesting experience this past week, being, the start of the season and all. My local equipment dealer always has a annual what they call a contractor demo day. So they actually host this a few blocks away from their shop at a local park. They take out a permit with the city and stuff, and they have a bunch of tents set up. They bring in porta potties and stuff. They've got food tents and stuff. They make a bunch of free food for everybody who's coming to check out. And then, of course, they have all of the representatives of the manufacturers of some of the equipment that they carry in their stores. And you can, of course, turn on and run anything you want and take stuff for a spin and try things out. It's a really well put on, event each and every year. I look forward to it. They have a registration desk at the front where you just confirm your registration. There, of course, it's all free, and they give you every year you get a T-shirt from the event, so it has the dealer's name on it, and it's just these screen printed T-shirts with some cool graphics and stuff on them, and every year it's a different shirt, so I always look forward to adding to my collection. I think I have 13 of them now. I've been going every single year since I started my lawn care business. And I still wear the shirts pretty much, on a daily basis. After work, when I get home and take a shower, I'll throw on one of those T-shirts. So I look forward to that. And I got to actually try out and run my very first stand-on mower. Well, not essentially the very first stand-on mower, because like I said previously on the podcast, I did see a guy across from one of the lawns I was mowing. He was doing a commercial property. It was actually a church, and he was using a Skag V-Ride last year, a 36-inch V-Ride. It was quite an older machine. It was pretty run down and beat. But I went over to talk to him to ask him how he liked it, and he asked if I wanted to jump on it. So I, got on it, and I maybe went about 5 feet or so on it. I didn't want to, wreck the guy's machine. But that was the only previous other experience. But at this demo day, of course, like I said, you could try out, pretty much anything you wanted. And they had this little course set up with some stakes in the ground. It was kind of like a little racetrack that you could drive around. It had a bunch of hairpin corners and things so that you could, try the maneuverability of different machines. The stakes were in the ground with ribbons tied around them, so you couldn't actually leave the course. You had to make it all the way through. So I got to try out the 36-inch Toro grandstand. Got a quick little lesson from the Toro rep there, and was able to take that for a spin. So that was my first real official ride, and I have to say it was pretty easy to drive one of those Toro grandstands. It was very maneuverable, but the controls were very familiar to me. They were pretty much exactly like a sit down zero turn, except you're standing and leaning against that front pad, and you've got those metal bars on the top to hold on to so that you're not falling off, because you're of course not seated. But the actual levers and controls there were pretty much exactly like a zero turn. So I really enjoyed that. I have to say, I was, using the machine, and I was like, I could really get used to this. My only concern would be, again, the weight, that I've always had issues with machines and their weight. But it convinced me more than ever that, if, I probably wouldn't buy a new one because I don't know, like I said, if it would really suit my business because of the weight and stuff. It looks like it would be good. The walk behind has been, pretty good, but then it's a lot less weight. With the 36-inch turf tracer that I've been using. But it convinced me that if, I've seen 2 of the Toro grandstands in a 36-inch size come up for sale last year. And in both cases, because of being unsure about them, I didn't really contact the person right away. It was sort of humming and hawing. And of course, by the time I thought, okay, maybe I'll go look at them, they had, in both cases, had sold. So this convinced me that, okay, now I've ridden one, I've tried it out on that little course, that if, a used one were to pop up, that I would probably go and look at it and possibly purchase it and take a shot on it, especially if it was a secondhand machine where I wouldn't be paying the full price for it and losing that sort of initial depreciation, in the case where I'm at, where it's basically taking a chance on whether I would be able to use it or whether it would be too heavy for the residential lawns that I do that tend to be pretty soggy and soft when you walk on them. So, it just gave me a brief glimmer of hope that maybe I can add one of those to my arsenal of mowers in the future. 36 would probably be the maximum size I'd be able to use. I'd actually prefer something smaller, maybe a 34. I don't think anybody makes a 34. I know that Wright makes a 32. The Wrights aren't available here. And I also would want a floating deck to be able to adjust the heights on the fly. But a 34 I think would be pretty neat if somebody came up with a 34-inch stander. Just would guarantee being able to get through gates and stuff, and get a lot of that done, and would give enough of a margin over the 21-inch mower to justify using it. So the other interesting thing that happened actually while I was looking at that 36-inch Toro was that I got recognized for the first time in person. So this really kind of took me back because I wasn't expecting it. And I just heard my name being called, and this nice guy comes up to me and starts thanking me for the podcasts and for the videos and stuff, and said that he started his business a year or two, last year. It was his first year, and that he used a lot of the information from the podcast and from others online as well. He named off a few YouTubers that he's been watching that we all know, and was saying how he enjoyed all of their content as well, and was sort of using everybody's content together and building his business that first year. So like I say, it was very strange to have somebody actually in a public place call my name and know what I've done. It's pretty quiet for me here in Canada when I look at all of my podcast stats, all of the downloads on iTunes, even the, YouTube videos that I've been doing lately, and looking at, the audience and all the analytics for that. Even that, it's, most of the audience is based in the United States. Over 70% of my audience on every platform, including even Instagram, is originating in the US. And then, that rest of the audience there, the remaining amount, is spread out amongst all of the other countries. So it was interesting that, I got recognized, and like I say, it just took me by surprise, but it was a totally enjoyable experience. We, chatted for a while. We hung out for a bit, talked about some equipment that we were looking and walking around. He was discussing some of the equipment that he was looking to purchase. We talked a bit about that, and he asked me a question about power raking. And, when the best time to power rake, that, he didn't know anything about power raking or how to clean it up or how to do that. And coincidentally, I also got a question on Instagram from a listener, I believe in the UK, that was asking as well for, some more technical type podcast episodes, and was asking if I could do some episodes, like I said, that were more of the technical variety. And so his question was, I'd love you to cover some technical stuff on the podcast, like the best and worst times to do these jobs for people new to lawn care like me. And he's referring to a previous question where he asked, hi, Julio, can I scarify a lawn in the rain? So scarify, or scarifying, for those of you that may not know, is basically power raking lawns. Just a different term for it. So I thought that would be, a great episode as well. It's one of those things, and that's why the suggestions and questions, and I'm always encouraging you guys to reach out and ask me those questions, and you can do that either by email. You can go to lawncarebusinesssuccess.com/contact and leave me a question there. You can reach out to me, say on Instagram, send me a direct message there, and you can also go to lawncarebusinesssuccess.com if you're not into typing out a long-winded question, and use the leave voicemail tab on the side there. Just click on that and record your message to me, and I'll get that as well. And it's so important because when I'm doing these episodes, I'm thinking of topics off of the top of my head. And, of course, after going on to 3 years now of doing a weekly lawn care podcast, 142 episodes in, I often overlook the topics I've covered and what topics I haven't covered. So it's very helpful when you guys can ask questions, because you guys are the ones, directly listening to these episodes, and you can spot the holes of things where I may have missed, or things that you need more clarification on, or things that you want help on. And of course, when I'm sitting here behind the microphone and I'm just chatting away about it, in my mind, I'm covering everything that I'm covering. So it's, because I've been through all of it, it's hard for me to recall what I've covered and what I haven't covered. But you guys listening, of course, like I said, it's easy, especially if you're starting out, where you can spot those holes of topics I may have missed that you want maybe some more information on. And of course, if it's something that I've done, in my business, then I can give you my basically my 2 cents on it. So that leads us to this week's episode on power raking your way to profit. So I'm just going to play the podcast announcements, and then we'll get into the episode right after this. So stay tuned. Hey guys, if you have any questions or comments about the show, I'd love to hear from you. You can head on over to lawncarebusinesssuccess.com/contact. And while you're there, why not join my mailing list and get access to a free PDF document of a landscape maintenance contract you can feel free to copy and use in your own business. For you Instagram users out there, be sure to follow me at Lawn Care Business Success. And if you haven't checked out my videos yet, well, what are you waiting for? Be sure to subscribe to the Lawn Care Business Success YouTube channel. Now, I know you guys love listening to audio while you work as much as I do, so I've partnered up with Audible to offer you guys a free 30-day trial and 2 free audiobooks of your choice. There's no long-term commitments, and you can cancel anytime. And get this, even if you cancel during your free trial period, you still get to keep the 2 free audiobooks. It's a great way to try the service and to see if Audible is right for you. So why not give it a try? Head on over to lawncarebusinesssuccess.com/audible. Now back to the show. Okay, so springtime for me is the time of year where I do my power raking and dethatching. Now, this may be different for you depending on where you live. So just take, this information, what I am going to discuss here with a grain of salt, and just basically understand that this is what works for me in this region of the world that I live in, basically the Pacific Northwest of the United States, Canada region, this little spot here. And this is what works for us. We get really wet weather throughout most of the year. Then the springtime comes. It's still pretty rainy, but we do get that sunshine coming through. So it's a nice mix of moisture and sunshine and warmer temperatures. Traditionally, then we get a complete drought in the summertime, where there's no rain for a few months. Lawns typically turn very dry and crunchy. They look like hay. And then in the fall, the rains begin again. Things start to green up, but the rains become pretty heavy at times. So this is why I power rake now in the spring. I know a lot of people do this sort of stuff in the fall, but here in the fall, like I said, things will start to green up, but there's just so much rain and not enough sun that if I were to power rake and do, say, a lawn reno at that time, for the most part, I'm not guaranteed that the results are going to turn the way I want them to, that the sun, there's not enough sun for the new seed to take and to establish a good enough root system before the winter comes. So for us, and then the winter, of course, is brutal here with just the amount of rain. And I've seen so many times with homeowners doing it where they're putting seed in the fall, and it just, it looks nice for maybe a month or so as the seedlings are starting to come up. But because of all the rain and the cold weather, the temperature starts dropping and the morning frost and stuff there in the fall, it quickly all dies off, and through the rest of the winter you see their lawns and it's just patches of dirt everywhere because nothing survived. So that's why this sort of formula that I came up with for me over the past 13 years has proven to work. In fact, when I'm quoting a lawn renovation, basically, which includes moss control, because of all the rain, we get a lot of moss growing in lawns here. So moss control, power raking, aerating, overseeding, lime, fertilizer, and top dressing. I will tell a client that, I'm doing all the steps to, guarantee results, but of course I can't guarantee the results fully, because I can guarantee that I'm doing all the steps that are required, but once I'm done, it's up to the client to make sure that that lawn is watered every day to ensure those results. Obviously, if they water for the first week and then kind of get fed up with having to go out there and make sure the lawn is properly watered, and they start to cut back the watering, then the success of those seedlings germinating and growing properly and not drying out is adversely affected. So I always tell the customers that I guarantee that everything I'm doing is, what we've talked about and everything that's needed for success. But, of course, then it goes to them, and they need to keep that watered and moist. So on the power raking side here, as far as the sort of the technical, what I have found to work with power raking, so I basically call power raking and dethatching two different things. At least this is how I explain it to my customers and how I have it sort of laid out on my lawn care company's website as two different services. So if somebody's looking for a dethatching, I generally basically call that as having the tines on the machine. So if you're not familiar with a power raking machine, basically it looks like a small lawnmower. It's got a bunch of these little tines or teeth at the bottom that are sort of loosely, they kind of swing around in there when the mower or the power raker is turned on and you engage the lever, that tensions a pulley which starts to turn those tines. There's a couple, two sets of teeth basically that rotate, and it basically mimics the raking motion of using, say, a rake on a lawn, like a hand rake. But just does this in a powered version, obviously. So when I'm doing a dethatching, I refer to the dethatching as a sort of gentler process. So you can adjust the height of how deep those power raking tines dig into the soil. Of course, the deeper you have it going into the soil, the harder it is to control the machine. It starts to bounce around as those teeth are hitting the ground. So you're not going crazy with this. I think the most you'd ever want your tines to sort of dig into the soil is maybe at the most a quarter of an inch. And even then, it could be a bit of an issue. But generally what you want to do is set your machine on a hard surface like a sidewalk or so. You want to lower the tines. Of course, the machine is not on now. You have the machine turned off. You put it on a concrete surface. You lower the tines because there's also a lever on the side that can raise and lower the tines. You can manually spin the tines so that the tines are at the lowest point that they would reach. And then you release that lever, and what you want to do is just adjust the height so that the bottom of those tines are just touching the concrete surface. And that's all that you want. And that would be your height adjustment. That's what I normally do, and that's what I have found to work the best. From there, you can, once you're doing the job, you can minutely adjust it if you need to go in a little bit deeper or a little bit higher. But generally, that is the setting I start with, is just having the bottom of those tines touching the concrete surface when you have it in the lowered position. So like I said, you want to make sure that that drum or reel that's at the bottom that houses all those tines, that you can manually spin it so that when the tines are hanging, at least one set of the tines are hanging, they're at the lowest point, that they're basically straight up and down. And then you lower that handle so that they're in the absolute lowest position, and then there's a knob there on the side that you can turn to adjust the height. And you basically want to lower the machine if it's not touching if those tines aren't touching the ground. Just lower it so that it's just touching. You don't want it pressing on the ground or nothing, just barely touching the ground. And of course, if they're like laying on an angle because the machine is too low, then you want to raise that up so that those teeth are just touching the bottom of those teeth are just touching the pavement surface. So that's your first step. The next step would be your conditions. So you want to make sure that your conditions are worthy of power raking. You don't want to be power raking when it's too damp or wet. And this is the question that I got from both of these individuals in the past week. Could they power rake in the rain? And the answer to this, for me at least, is absolutely not. You will create such a mess and so much more work for yourself that it's totally not worth it. And by so much more work, I'm not saying a little bit of work. I am literally saying it will be at least 10x of the amount of work you're creating for yourself by trying to do this in damp conditions. So what happens is the ground, of course, is saturated. It can be muddy. You have to remember that the power raking machines themselves are not self-propelled. So there's areas, of course, in some spots where the machine will pull itself along as it's raking because, of course, it's sort of, gripping the ground through those tines, and it kind of moves itself forward. But there's other areas, like if you get to a slope or a slight hill and it becomes, all you trying to push that machine. That brings me to another point. If you're trying to do hills, this is almost I wouldn't say impossible thing to do, but it is a lot more work, again, because the machine is not self-propelled, that it just becomes a ton of work. So a lot of times, if you're going downhill, you can't control the speed of the machine because it starts to, of course, you're going downhill and the machine is trying to pull forward because it's raking. And if you go too fast when you're power raking, it doesn't do a good job. It kind of jumps and skips over areas. So generally when I'm power raking, what I'm trying to do is basically just steady the machine. So I'm turning on the machine, I'm guiding it along a certain path. I'll usually do the perimeter first, just like I'm mowing. And then it really depends on the lawn. Sometimes I'll just continue on doing circles all the way to the middle. Sometimes I will just go up and down and lay stripes. Again, it really depends on the layout of the landscape, but essentially what I'm trying to do is just basically control the machine, steady it so that it's not bouncing around everywhere. So to this point, one of the biggest downsides to power raking, and especially if you're doing a ton of power raking, is vibration. Because that machine is pounding the ground literally, and it's trying to bounce around. I will have one hand, usually my left hand, I will have, on the top handle, and that the bail, the other little handle that you kind of depress to start the tines spinning. But if the ground is really bad, or I'm trying to control the machine, I'll actually have my other arm lower down on the side of the handle instead of at the top. I'll have it down along the side, and I'm actually pressing my whole forearm against the side of the handle, just trying to steady the machine and trying to keep it from bouncing. But this creates tons of vibration in your hands, and I have gone years, just a bit of warning here. I have gone some years when I was doing, tons and tons of power rakes all at once. Day after day after day. And power raking season, we'd be done, I'd be finished, and I would literally still have pins and needles in my hands for up to 2 months, after doing the power raking. So just a word of warning. It is very, tough on your nerve endings and, all that. You always hear about the warnings about vibration and stuff on power equipment. And generally, unless, you're doing something like trimming in the same position for a long period of time, it usually isn't, a big deal. That's sort of the only time I really experience the pins and needles now, is if I'm trimming a large property and you're in that sort of, trimmer held position for a long time, where maybe blood circulation is being cut off at your elbow. That'll get some pins and needles for a little bit, and they will go away after a few minutes. But this, I'm talking about like serious nerve ending damage, where it causes just that vibration, those pins and needles in your hands, to linger on for months after doing the power raking. But this is talking about doing power raking day in and day out, for, say a month, where you're just doing lawn after lawn after lawn and multiple passes on those lawns, power raking that, the machine, particularly, in the conditions I was working in, where it's trying to bounce around and all that, and it gets pretty bad. So just like I said, a word of warning there. But generally, like I said, I'm just trying to control the machine. Now, technique wise, what I'll do, like I said, I break this up into 2 different services. Power raking, I generally will have those tines raised up a little bit. So it's basically just combing through the lawn, not touching the surface of the lawn, just slightly higher than you would be if you were power raking, and I will generally do less passes on this. So I'll do maybe 1 pass, maybe 2 passes, and that's it for power raking. I'm not concerned about getting out all of the thatch and stuff, because power raking can be pretty bad on the lawn itself. It can be pretty stressful on the lawn. So I call it dethatching sort of a lighter version of that. We're just loosening up what we can, and cleaning that up, and, just letting the lawn breathe a bit. What I refer power raking as is just a more aggressive form of that. So I'll have, like I said, those tines set so that they're actually touching the ground surface ever so slightly. And here, because like I said, it's mainly moss that we're dealing with, that we're trying to, get out. It requires a bit more work. So it'll typically, on an average lawn here, will be 3 passes that I'm doing. So basically, I do that perimeter. I'll do those stripes in the middle. All that moss comes up, and here the moss is so thick. It can be, a few inches thick at times. and you've got mountains of stuff being left behind by the power raker. So I'll go through the whole lawn, and whether I have somebody helping or I'm working by myself, I go through the whole lawn, and then I'll go behind and start to clean it up. Now, depending on what we're doing, I'll tend to clean up. If it's a smaller lawn, I'll just rake up the stuff manually into piles and put it, dispose of it. If we've got two people going, we'll either do that or we'll follow behind with an older Honda HRC 216 commercial mower with some, shot blades on it, and just mow up the debris, going really, really slow, and then just dumping the bag every few seconds whenever it fills up. But it saves the sort of a bit of the strain and the hard work of actually raking it by hand after. So generally, once that's all cleaned up, then I will go and I'll do it again. So I'll go over the whole lawn area all over again. If I'm working with people helping, like I say, I will start off the power raking, and then they'll follow behind either with the mower or they're raking piles. The power raking itself goes pretty quick. The cleanup part is what takes the longest. So then I'll, if I'm doing the backyard as well, I'll go to the backyard and start power raking those while the, crew is cleaning up. If I'm by myself, then I just do it in sections. So I'll clean up and do that front yard and stuff, and then I'll go do the backyard once I'm all done, the front yard section. But like I say, I will hit it again a second time, and I have found that I like going in the opposite direction. So if I'm going in one direction for stripes, I like to do the second pass in a 90-degree angle, because the machine's the exact same size, and you're doing, the perimeter, and then you're going the second pass, you're doing that perimeter again. There's areas that you can miss in between the wheels and the stripes and stuff. So you generally want to go sort of 90 degrees to how you went that first time. And I'll do that, clean that all up, do all the raking, disposing, all that, and then I will hit it a third time. So by this point, there's areas that are, because I'm dealing with moss. Moss is like a shag carpet. It comes up in big sections, and there'll be areas where it's just dirt left behind. So if there's big areas like that, I'll avoid those on the third pass, and I'll just go over sort of the troubled spots with that, and then do the cleanup. And once I'm done, if I hadn't been mowing up to this point already, if I was raking on manually with just regular rakes and tarps, then I would bring out the mower at this point and put I'd have some crappy old blades on it, and I would go over that and start to basically mow really, really short as possible. Now, one thing you're going to find here, and you're going to need if you're going to be using a mower with some blades on it, is you're going to need a scraper, a good deck scraper like the Grass Buster, because you are exposing soil and dirt. You'll get a lot of that, at least I get a lot of that here because of, like I said, it being moss and stuff. So it'll start to pack up around the deck, and I'll have to do some deck scrapings to remove all of that. The other thing to remember is if you're going to be using a mower for this, and like I say, I do suggest using a mower even just for the end, after you've cleaned up everything, if you're going to rake it manually, to at least use the mower just to basically cut the rest of the existing lawn as short as possible. I'm talking like almost scalping the lawn, but not quite scalping it, right? But cutting it as short as you possibly can. And leaving that sort of shaved type surface there. That leaves you ready for the next steps. Now, this is like I'm talking the power raking, not your dethatching. If you're just dethatching, then you're going to have still plenty of lawn left. Like I said, if you're dethatching, then you're not as aggressive. You're doing maybe one pass and you're just loosening up that dead yellow grass that's in the lawn, and that's it. you clean that up and you're good. Maybe give it a mow and you're good to go. But in an aggressive power raking to remove things like moss and maybe tons of, if your thatch problem is, to the point where the lawn needs to be completely renovated, then this is what you would be doing. At least this is what I've been doing for the past 12 or 13 years that has worked for me. So that basically some of the things, like I said, besides using your mower and stuff to clean it up, the other thing you want to make sure is you have dust masks on. The RZ masks are great for this, but regular paper masks I have used in the past as well. It kicks up a ton of dust when you're doing the cleanup if you're using a mower, because like I said, there's a lot of exposed dirt areas. And generally that's covers about the power raking or dethatching portion, and this is why you want to do it in dry conditions. If it's wet, if the ground is wet, it just makes it so much harder. The machine struggles to get through those areas, and then of course all of the debris is wet. It makes it so much harder for cleaning up. I wouldn't even bother trying to use a mower if it's wet, because like I said, there's dirt and stuff mixed in there. It'll just clog up the mower and maybe cause some excessive wear on clutch plates and things like that. So I wouldn't even bother with that. If you were to accidentally do it in the rain, and I by no means am endorsing you to do it when it's wet, absolutely wait till it's dry to do it. When you're cleaning it up, like I said, your workload would be 10x if it's wet. If it's dry, even things like thick moss, once it's power raked, is light and fluffy. It's all at the surface. It's all broken apart. It rakes extremely easily, and that's why I can use like the mower to just go around and pick it up. Sometimes in some years and some lawns, when I had the John Deere tractor, I was using that. So I would power rake, and then I would use the John Deere tractor with a bagger kit and just suck it all up into the bags because it's so light and fluffy. So those are some of the things, but generally, like I said, you want to make sure you have dust masks. You want to make sure that you have some type of a scraper to use to clean out the deck if necessary. You want to make sure the conditions are dry. You're going to need rakes as well. Tarps, even if you're taking the stuff away, we'll generally put tarps down. I'll rake, if I'm doing it manually, I'll rake into piles throughout the lawn. And don't try to combine piles and do extra raking, trying to just rake wherever you're at. So rake a pile here, turn around, rake another pile there. Just make multiple piles all over the lawn. And then, you bring your tarp, and I generally use like a 6-foot by 8-foot tarp, something around that size. And, I'll drag it around and then just rake the piles onto the tarp. I can get usually maybe 2, maybe 3 piles onto a tarp. Then I can haul that to the trailer over my shoulder and then dump it into the back of the trailer. Because when I'm mowing, I leave grass clippings and stuff in the cities, provides these green bins, but with power raking, because there's so much debris, I will generally, include with my pricing the disposal fee to take the stuff to the dump, because I can fill my trailer, say half full with one house. I can get maybe 2, maybe 3 houses worth of power raking before my trailer is completely full to the top. And even then I'm like jumping on top of it to try to compact it down so I can get a tarp over the top of it, so the stuff's not flying over the road as I'm going down the road. But generally, those are the methods that I use for power raking. And then after that, I would, if I was doing a full lawn reno, because the power raking is so aggressive and they're left with basically dirt. I don't just do the power raking. If it's at that point, I sell them a whole package. And basically, I would then aerate that lawn. I would put some lime and fertilizer down, and then I would overseed the entire lawn quite heavily, and then I would top dress it with a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch of really good organic soil. And then that was it. The customer would then be left to, continue with the watering schedule to ensure those results. And I would check in on it each and every week. But you'll see the results pretty quickly after that. And within 8 weeks, 2 months max, their lawn is completely filled in. There may be a couple of spots that require some more seed, but I generally tell the client that they can't mow the lawn for at least 6 weeks. So that they don't disturb the seedling, because like I said, here it's very aggressive, the power raking, and they're not left with much. So anywhere they're putting the mower, they're trampling over new grass seedlings and such. The other tip, if you are dealing with moss, and it's an added service here, is to make sure that you are selling a moss control first, and you're doing that a week or so in advance before power raking. I've done this every year, and it's one of the things that I get from clients who say, their neighbor power raked their own lawn last year, and now this year their lawn is covered with moss, and they couldn't figure out what the heck is going on, and it's only after I've explained to them that I'm going to do a moss control, and then do the power raking and all those steps. And then they clue in, because they're like, well, why are you doing a moss control if you're just going to remove all the moss mechanically anyways? And then I'll say, well, because you have to kill the moss. Moss will spread when it's airborne with the spores. So if I disturb that moss and all that dust is flying, once I'm done, all the spores are just going to settle back down on your lawn, and they're also going to settle on your neighbor's lawn as the wind carries them. And then that's when they have that light bulb moment, and they're like, that must explain why I've got so much moss this year, because my neighbor just went and rented a power rake last year, and they power raked their own lawn, but they didn't use any moss control or anything like that. And so I always explain to them, you got to kill that moss first. Once it turns black, then you're safe to go in there and remove the moss. So of course, that's a topic there that a lot of you guys probably don't need to deal with. A lot of you guys don't have the moss issues that we have here in the Pacific Northwest because of all the rain. But just an added sort of thing, if you are in this region or in a wet area that does get a lot of moss, to make sure that you're killing that moss. And like I said, it's just an added service as well, because I have to make a separate trip. And basically this is what I'll tell people, is that I'm doing the job in 3 trips. The first trip is the moss control. About a week later, I'll come back and do the power raking and aerating together. So I'll power rake, clean up, aerate, and then I'll do maybe 2 or 3 houses that day, and then I'll come back and do the fertilizer, the lime, the seeding, and I'll have a load of dirt with me already, and do the top dressing. So it lets me utilize my trailer in each way, because when I'm power raking, obviously I can't carry the soil with me as well. So I'll have just the machines and the back of the trailer empty to carry the debris away to the dump. And then when I come back the following visit, I'll have the seed with me, the fertilizer, the lime, the starter fertilizer, the lime, and then I'll have a load of soil with me as well, and the wheelbarrows and shovels, and we'll do and the rakes, of course, the landscape rakes, to do the top dressing. And basically with the top dressing, just a quick tip there, because it's kind of similar as the power raking. What you want to do is you fill your wheelbarrow up once all your seed and everything is already on the ground. You don't want to be putting seed on top of the soil. You want to cover that soil so it gets good soil contact, and you're only putting, like I say, 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch of soil down. But basically I just go over the lawn with the wheelbarrow, and I just drop tiny little piles everywhere, and then I'll use the back of a landscape rake, so the flat end, and I just spread it out. And just spread it out evenly, and I'll start in maybe one corner of the lawn and work my way back out to the exit, and get the whole lawn covered that way. So hopefully I didn't miss anything there, and that covers any of your questions on power raking. As far as pricing goes, I would say do not cut yourself short. It is singly the most labor intensive job that I do. Of all the jobs that we do, is the power raking. Just the cleanup is just so intense. The controlling the machine, the vibration, all that stuff you have to deal with. So there's guys in my area that will charge pretty cheap to do power raking. I've seen people charging $60, $80 for power raking. And throughout the years, my price has slowly gone up and up and up. And I don't do as many as I used to. Those crazy days of doing tons and tons of them, and then, having all those pins and needles. I only do a select few now each year, but I'm charging a premium. So on the power raking side, I'm now, charging in the $450 range to do a power raking. But and some guys are charging, like I say, $80 to do that same power raking. But, I'm being thorough. I'm doing enough passes to make sure I'm getting it all out. And then I'm also doing the rest of the steps as well. So the power raking portion of a lawn reno, like I said, I wouldn't just do a power raking. I would do just a dethatching for somebody if they wanted just a light dethatching. But if we're doing aggressive power raking, removing moss, then it's sold as part of a package. And typically, I'm in, I could be charging somebody $1,100, $1,200, $1,300 to do a complete lawn renovation of power raking, aerating, fertilizing, liming, overseeding, and then top dressing, doing the whole from beginning to end sort of package, and 3 separate trips or visits to their home to complete all of that. And the power raking, including disposal, taking it to the dump and all that stuff, would be in that $450 range. But, prices don't really mean nothing, because it's all relative to the sizes of the property and all that. So that's why I don't like talking about prices too much, because it's geographically completely, different what I charge, what somebody else can charge and all that. But I know there'll be questions about it. So that's why I'll just, throw sort of the pricing in there. So that's it for this week, guys. Here's to wishing you guys all overwhelming success and freedom in your lawn care business. Bye for now.